Welcome to Today in EVE Online, September 4th edition. We'll be looking at another update for the September release that pertains to wormholes and their visuals. There are some visual upgrades. We'll show you some pictures and talk about it, so if you're listening to this, you can hear it as well. Hanging out with me is Caleb.
Hey, guys.
So let's just start at wormholes, and then we'll go to the news after that. Looks like wormholes are getting an upgrade on the graphics engine that is below them. Actually, not the graphics engine, but on the graphics that are below. One of the things that CCP has to consider is how does it look when it's working on a machine that's powerful enough to render out the full beauty that CCP art team puts behind it. But they also have to consider what's it look like for people that don't have those resources on their local machine. So what you have had in the past is, as an example, we'll use the sun. They upgraded the suns recently, so the suns were much bigger and actually looked like suns. And this is what I'm talking about is the graphics in the game. If you fly to a sun, you can actually you can feel the weight of the size of the what do you call it? Celestial body. It used to be just kind of glowing light was coming out of this area and you could warp to the middle of it and all that sort of thing. But now if you warp to the sun, you can hear the crackling. You could see solar flares. You definitely get different colors of suns, whether it might be an orange sun or a blue star.
We're just missing the damage, right? We're missing damage from solar flares.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned that in this blog post that CCP just put out with this upgrade. It's too bad that you can still fly to the center of the sun and not be instantly incinerated. But so that's what it looked like if you go look at a sun, what it looks like right now. But if you have low graphics or you turn all your graphics low, it just looks like a big circle in the sky, almost like a negative space. So they are changing that with this new engine to look more like the old suns if you're using low graphics with beams of light coming out of this glowy object rather than a big circle out of the sky. And that technology underpins some of the changes that we're looking at now, which are for wormholes. So I'll go ahead and let's see. Okay, so check this out. This is a Devblog called Wormholes and Stars Get an Update. Okay, so it wasn't just wormholes, it is stars. The interesting thing, and the reason it mostly pertains to wormhole, is because they have visual cues now that I don't think they had before. I may be mistaken. But now you can actually check out a wormhole and visually tell its age and its capacity, how much mass can go through it still, and then its ship size limit. And I think this is very important for players to get good at. To identify a wormhole and get those three pieces of information instantly can save them a lot of time if they're in a hurry. Normally what you do to check their age or capacity or size limit is you have to click on it and check information, and then the information is given to you. But if you can visually see it, I think that's pretty cool. I don't know if you remember, Caleb, a long time ago when Trinity Engine came out, which was a graphic upgrade to EVE Online that happened around 2008. One of the big deals was you could tell that a ship is wearing armor as opposed to having shields. You know, like there was visual cues for PvP pilots. You could tell what turrets they had.
It's also on the same page as, I don't know if you remember that I told you about the fact that some of those sites that you could go to, the sound that they had would basically tell you what they contained. So you would get an information of threat level and variation based on the audio track that was running while you were close proximity to the site.
Right. So you're getting visual and sound cues for information that you need in order to be tactically aware. And all that is pretty interesting.
When you learn, right? When you get in the habit of recognizing it, that's really the cool thing, right? Because then you don't really need to check that information anymore, because you just need the visual cues or the audio cues, and then it's just habit, right? So you get habituated to the visuals and the audio.
Yeah, I've noticed too that they're putting more information on gates. So again, you have more visual information that you don't have to like dig deep into menus to find out. Overall, what do you think of that though? The game becoming more visual and the information being given to you in the environment rather than you learning how to right click, look up info, and interpret that info.
I think it's a really good direction, right? It's much more akin to other games, and if we can save some real estate space on our UI, it's just going to be so much better, such an improvement. And again, the art team never really disappoints.
No, and it's kind of funny. The art is of course, art is the bottleneck apparently for CCP. At least that's what I've heard. That's where a lot of time is spent making the artwork work with the design of the game designers, right? You have game designers, then you have programmers that can program the behavior the designers are looking for, but then you have an art component to it that needs to be created, and that's where a lot of time is spent.
Quite often they are ahead of the programmers. At least I get the impression that when it comes to bigger projects, that's, well, quote unquote, been roadmapped, the art crew is not that much of a lag. It's more like rushed things where they always lag behind, right?
Yeah.
Because they do so much conceptual art, and then it's just really polishing and then finishing it.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't heard like at what point the stuff gets bottlenecked, but I did hear like a lot of time is spent on the art. Therefore, you can't just make a lot of changes to the game because they have to go through this process or create new items in the game.
Like this has been presented long ago, right? It's almost a year since they started talking about these changes. Of course, they need to polish them because they also wanted these features with information. So that might have been a bottleneck. But other than that, I don't get the impression that the art team is the slow boat.
Yeah. So joining us also is Pando. How you doing, Pando?
Hey, what's up?
Hey.
So there's news that just came out about Wormhole, so what do I see there?
Yeah.
New graphics.
All right.
It was presented at Vegas, right? The first iteration of it, I believe it was presented at Vegas.
I think they said there would be visual updates to wormholes, and those have arrived. Also, visual updates to the sun, mostly for low-end graphics. But what you can do now is you can look at a wormhole and determine its age, its capacity, and its size limit, all visually. Once you understand like what the patterns are.
Does that work for potato mode too? Like, is that also for like low shader stuff? Do I also see all that? Yeah.
Yep, it does. Mm-hmm. So they've been able to differentiate, and this might be interesting for you. That is someone who is a fleet commander for the initiative that takes hundreds of stealth bombers through wormholes at a time.
Yeah, well, I'm mapping wormholes almost every day with a team of people, right?
Yeah.
One of them just subscribed actually to you.
Oh,
Beer's
really?
one of my best wormhole mappers actually. So.
Oh, hey, that's awesome. Thanks. Bringing the people with you. How are you doing, Pando?
Oh, I'm doing great. I actually planned on streaming the War Legacy versus Panda Fam or whatever they call them right now.
Right.
Winter Core. But it didn't seem like a fight, so they're getting a little bit blobbed at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, is it actually happening, or is it did one side not show up again?
Oh, it was blue balls, I think.
Blue balls means one side didn't show up.
Obviously, yeah. It's like that girl you want to have fun with. She's teasing you, but then she sends you home with blue balls. Right? That's what the term's coming from.
All right. Editing note. We'll push the button there to take that out in case family's listening. No, I'm just kidding.
Come on.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's funny. There's we are going to talk about this actually tonight on Talking in Stations. We have people from the Legacy. I guess it's PandaFam War. We talked to Headliner this last weekend and talked to him about his recent move. I think he took Pandemic Legion dreadnoughts into the area. I think that looks like it's going to have heavier involvement from them. And tonight we're going to talk to some of the logistics and fleet commanders in that area, so we can get an update on what's going on. It seems like one of the few hot wars that are going on at the moment.
So Headliner said they brought dreads to the Winterco Legacy war zone, or what?
Yeah, that was the piece of information that we got. I don't think we asked him that directly in case it wasn't public, but by now it should be public. There was some dreads moved into the area from Pandemic Legion.
But what, like, was it suitcase? Like, did they bring subcaps too? Because I think dreads alone, it's not gonna have that impact, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to field dreads on a big stage, like if the fight is already too big, I think it's too hard. Like you have to really pick your fights now.
Right. I mean, that's like a one shot deal. I don't know if they actually, and by suitcase you mean sticking subcapital ships into the dreadnought to act like a suitcase, yes. So you bring your whole clothes with you when you get down to the theater of action. Exactly. And that is possible. I don't know. Again, one of the things that Fraternity is famous for is just giving you the ships that you need. So they may not need to do that. But
yeah, that's true. See. That's true.
So that's one of the advantages of fighting with them. They produce all this stuff for you. Let's have a look. The theater we're talking about is Detroit is basically it. That's deep space down here. It's kind of far southeast. And that has been going on since January, I believe. That is a long war.
Yeah, it has been going a while. And I actually just talked to Elo. Like, I was surprised they like the group Black Legion and like people who follow Elo, like whenever he's back, right? There's a little bit of a cult going on. I don't even know how to describe it otherwise. But people, come back suddenly and like he's able to, get those numbers together quickly. But usually people that join a group like that, they are very much fun oriented and they're not interested in like having a long, ugly war, right? So I'm surprised how long this has been going, and I mean, I'm sure the numbers suffered over time, but yeah, it's a surprise to me. That's has been going on for a while now.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate that point, that his guys like to fight in small, fast bursts, and protecting structures was something that was probably not in their interest, or, I mean, maybe protecting them is, but definitely not taking them down. So we're seeing his leadership kind of get tested, and can he keep his group active, having to do stuff that's not necessarily fun. But I don't know how much taking down of structures they have done unless it's defensive, taking out stuff that Test or Legacy coalition is putting down into their territory. But it's amazing how well that fight has been going kind of for both sides, in that the lines haven't really shifted that much. Lately, they've been starting to shift, but it's been a long time of really Fraternity holding back Test. Let me unmute one of our game dev friends here. Oh, you're not muted, Vexer. I'm trying to unmute you for nothing. Anyway, so we'll get another update on that tonight on Talking in Stations, the midweek report. Panda, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm just keeping my guys busy as good as I can. Do some Stuka fleets. play around like mid-scale stuff, and then obviously like streaming and stuff. So I try to keep it fresh as long as this blackout thing is going.
How's your streaming coming along?
Oh, well, so surprisingly, I enjoy it very much. Right? So for years I was thinking about doing it, and anyone who's listening who might be thinking about it, you should definitely give it a shot. Because I always thought like it's gonna be a little bit more like it's gonna feel like work, and I love this game, right? I love to play it, and I don't want it to feel like work. So I never made that step. I gave it a try if it's technically possible, like I don't know, a year or two ago, and it was, but I didn't want to jump in because I don't want to half-ass it, right? And yeah, so I gave it a shot, and actually it's a welcoming change for me, right? If you're doing a lot of the same stuff for years in the game, like FCing, and then strat ops here, strat ops there, it's very refreshing to do it a little bit different, right? So it's a welcoming change, and it's actually way more enjoyable than I thought.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about something that maybe you could give me some insight into, but it seemed like we were going over the problems that that I guess nullsec was having in the last 6 months, not since blackout, but even before that. I'll put up a couple charts here. Let's see if I can get them up here. I might have moved them out of the way. Here they are. And you could see that there was a slump already happening a while ago. I must have moved the charts. So I'll grab them from our internal channels here. So these were posted on, I'm not showing them yet, but as soon as I find them, I'll put them on there.
I think I have to refresh the stream.
No, it's not. They're not up there yet. They're not up there yet. Here they are. I'll just grab them from here. I couldn't find them on my desktop, so there's one. And what this shows me is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'll just bring them all up and then I can talk about them one at a time. And there's only 3. Okay.
So I like that it shows end of rage.
Yes. There's some bullet points in here on, let's zoom in so you can see. Yeah, so let's actually go to this one here called Slump Post Pre-Chaos Era. And what I'm looking at is this graph. It was posted, I don't know the gentleman's name, on Reddit. And it was really kind of mapping key moments in EVE Online since 2008, January, up to now. And that's a ton of years, right? That's like 11 years of activity. And you can see that he's done ships destroyed as well as ISK destroyed. And what I was looking at was the slump that really happened after, let's zoom in now to this. The slump really started after the Tribute War. And the Tribute War is not the one that just happened, right? There's been many wars in Tribute, at least 3 major ones. But the middle one is the one we're talking about. And that was right after the Casino War, World War B. There was a settling of the winning parties, the Money Badger coalition that won. And the people that settled were Northern Coalition, obviously, and Pandemic Legion in one area. And then there was CO2 that kept their SOV because they switched sides in the middle of that war, and Test Alliance. And they were attacked by NCPL to move them out of there. And there was some disagreements with strong leadership disagreeing. And so they basically said, yeah, let's actually take these guys out. We're no longer worried about the Imperium and Goon Swarm, so let's take these guys out and send them somewhere else. And they did. They destroyed the first keep star that was defended in MTAC-O that belonged to CO2, and CO2 and Test had to migrate south, and that is where they have been ever since. So that is the peak of war that you can see as far as ships destroyed. And then since then, it really has been a decline. So we're talking about, if we look at the dates, that's 2017, basically February or March. And it's been going down ever since. So that tells me at least the ships being destroyed, even though, and this is what's interesting, in 2018, we may have seen the biggest battles EVE has ever hosted, right? The Battle of Nine Tac 4, the $1 million battle as it was coined, had
Stop it.
10,000. Yeah, I know. Probably should put that one to rest. That was coined by Pro God Legend as he was trying to drum up outside viewership. And it worked because I was streaming that battle live and there was 12,000 people watching. It's probably a record for EVE Online, for at least a player hosted.
12,000? Holy shit.
12,500, yeah, for 8 hours or 6 hours. Yeah, it was really funny.
Now imagine the game without tie-dye at all. Now imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the best advertisement you could ever imagine. Huh? Those 12,000 people are going to be amazed. Awesome. But instead, we get the tie-dye and stuff doesn't work out. You can't really make the plays you, like, in theory, should be able to make and stuff like this. So, it's a little bit disappointing.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, it takes a while to, well, maybe not, because you get those people. No, you wouldn't, because this battle was expected, I think. Or was that 9GC?
What do you mean?
9GC was the first fight that happened that the Imperium wasn't able to take out NC. So that's not the $1 million fight or whatever.
It was 9-4, correct.
Yeah, okay. I always get those confused because the first fight of the 2018 that was big was 9GC, I think. But 9 Tac 4 was the big fight. Without tie-dye, it would go a lot faster, right? Instead of 6 hours, it might be an hour and a half. And and now with the 64-bit client, you can actually zoom in and you can get some detail on cannons going off. And imagine all that happening real time. It would actually look exciting. I mean, it would be a completely different visual experience.
It's just a dream. Like, if let's say Hadean get their stuff out there, and then like 5 years, let's be realistic, 5 years or something, we get this new technology into the game, and there's actually no tie-dye in a world. But like, I don't think we are actually that far away from it than like people think, because if you have no tie-dye, you also have way more kill speed. You have higher kill speed, there's going to be less people in the system, obviously, because they're getting killed. So there's the sweet spot where you have enough kill speed to maintain the numbers, right? So the server can keep up. I don't think we are that far away from it. I mean, at the moment with the technology right now, I think we are as far as we can get. But maybe there's just that little bit of technology coming out in the next couple of years that makes that possible, and then we can have $1 million fight, because stuff dies quick. Right? If someone makes a mistake, whoops their Titan, like for example the HX5 Keepstar from NC. Right? If you whoop your Titans into the bad spot and you don't have an answer, then you lose all these. But in tie-dye, that takes time.
See, this is what
the tech is definitely just around the corner, right? It's just about the fact that it takes a while to actually migrate everything onto a new tech platform, especially when you're changing the software and not just installing it on new hardware.
I think you're right. I think we are close to that, Pando and Caleb. And this is what I think would be the natural answer to the massive proliferation of capital ships that you have. If people get into trouble, they would have less time to be bailed out of that trouble. And so teams that were actually very good at initiating ambushes would be able to get in and out before they get stuck and everybody has to everybody piles in. So you might have seen more ambushing, whether it happens on a super cap level or a sub cap level, because there's no tie-dye to slow it down so everybody thinks. The other thing is, inside of combat...
A small question to Pando. If we get to a point where we can do maybe 12,000 or maybe even 15,000 in one fight, wouldn't that kind of mean that we would have to boost subcaps a little bit to actually make it valid to show up in those numbers?
Hold on. Before you move us in that direction, what I wanted to get to was that you have battles that you can't call friends fast enough to help, but you also have situations in tie-dye, the big fights, where players don't have a lot of time to, especially FCs, to lay out commands and reinforce those commands so the communication is very clear. So I think you would have an advantage if you were a more experienced pilot and you knew what to expect and you knew how the rhythm of the fight went when it was at full speed without any tie-dye. So I think it might change the actual combat.
Exactly. I mean, tie-dye changes combat. For example, everyone knows like I love to fly Stukas. In a tie-dye fight, Stukas lose a lot of their potential against subcaps. Because if I hit the MJD, it's a 5-second spool up, and then we have to align and make sure the bombs are flying in the right direction, if we even hit the right spot and so on, right? That's a lot of time in tie-dye. A hostile FC can then react perfectly. In the first take, he can already make adjustment, tell people, keep telling them. Everyone's gonna have a good reaction time. In the first tick, they're already spread out, or they boost themselves, or stuff like this, right? Or they're just ready to defend, and all this kind of stuff, right? In a no tie-dye fight, because we are running Stuka so much, we are very fast, right? So we put on a fast pace, and most of these cannot keep up with it because they're not used to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we catch them, right?
Right.
Will we still have escalation if we don't have tie-dye? Will we actually be able to get into the fight in big numbers before the fight is over?
Sure. 9TAC4 was a pre-planned fight. When you fight over a structure, everybody arrives at the timer and they're expecting their moment to jump in. What you would have is less of the unexpected fights growing and growing and growing in size because everybody has plenty of time right now with tie-dye to get there.
That used to be actually when we were still outside of any coalition, like years ago. That used to be PL's and I think to an extent NC, but I think mostly PL's strategy against us. They don't have their super caps super close by, but there wasn't fatigue. So they were just waiting for us to get tackled in our supers. And then there's tie-dye, we can't escape while they're on the way. Yeah. It takes them 10 minutes to get there. So we could never, even if they're not there with their supers, we could never field our supers against bigger groups because we would always have to think about, oh shit, what if we get locked down in tie-dye? We're gonna get completely removed. So all they would have to do is create tie-dye and spam dictators. We're never gonna get away. So
and at that time, I believe this probably pre-Phoebe jump nerfs, so they could probably cross the universe or cross the galaxy within 9 jumps, which they could accomplish in rapid succession. So they could get anywhere within 30 minutes. And that was their calling card. So yeah, that was a big suppressive. One of the things that was talked about a lot at that time was we need to really nerf, super cap projection.
Yeah, correct. And so I think it's better. Right. I think we're in a good spot now with the fatigue we've got.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on. Sorry, Caleb, maybe we'll come back at the end here, but I wanted to go back to these numbers here that we're showing you, this graph that shows that basically since the Tribute War, where CO2 and Tess was knocked out of the North, which is basically the aftermath of the Casino War and World War B, all in 2017. It has been a slow decline of ships blowing up. It doesn't mean value blowing up, but ships blowing up. And if we look at the next one, we will see that the value of ships blowing up peaked at X-47 and UALX. And that was last summer in 2018, where we saw some of the biggest fights. So even though less ships were blowing up, it wasn't until, and I believe that was, right around this time, actually last year, when X-47 and UALX was happening. Those were big, big battles with huge losses. So the money lost was a lot, but there was less ships blowing up. But even since then, so we're talking about the winter and then the spring, the money blowing up has actually fallen as well. So we were in a slump at least since last year this time. And if you want to say ships blowing up, we were in a slump since 2017. Now, what's that say? Why am I bringing this up? I don't think you can look at those numbers. I may be wrong. I may be interpreting this incorrectly, but I don't think you can look at those numbers and say that, the engine of destruction that nullsec is about isn't functioning as well as it has in the past. It certainly isn't going up, but it's not even stabilized. It's going down. And some people say like, well, there were big wars then. But if you look at the trend line started in 2014, which would basically be the aftermath of the Halloween War. That's 5 years ago. And since then, you've had a trend line that essentially goes up. So, the last 5 years, the trend line's been going up, and then it peaked last year and it's been going down. And I think what enters into this is CCP looking at that saying, everybody's too safe. The wars aren't really, the conflict isn't really producing the destruction we want to see. We need more destruction. Let's do things to make the place more destructive. And we'll take a close-up at that. Yeah, even the battles that were happening in 2018 last year, all summer, it was a very busy summer. Even those battles were not producing the count of ships that were destroyed. The ships were bigger and cost more, so the expense of those ships was higher. But the actual number of ships getting destroyed was less. And that makes me think that there were less people involved in those fights. There was less people with bigger ships.
Is that showing ISK value or number of ships?
This one here is number of ships, I believe. The other one was ISK value. Here.
Because if it's ISK value, you have to account for the fact that the mineral prices have been tanking for the last 5 years.
That's very good.
And you also have to correct for lack of users, right? Because the PCU has also been dropping. So it might actually not be that bad, considering how many people are left and what the price index is on ships.
Well, I don't know about the PCU numbers. I think those have been pretty stable for the last year. But what you have seen is the mineral prices hit the floor, which would reduce the value of the ships being blown up. So it's a very good point. I don't think that accounts for the trend line going in reverse. And if it does account for that, that shows you another symptom of a problem, I think. In either case, with both those things combined, it looks like less people were involved in the destruction since 2 years ago, and less destruction overall is actually happening.
Well, we know that it was only like about 2/3 of the normal size of a full fleet on the Imperium, right? Compared to what they would have had if they had tooted the horn and brought everyone on.
Yeah, the horn of
Yeah, the horn.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that chaos is a miracle that's working. We don't know. These statistics really don't hit chaos. Chaos starts right after these end. So we'll see in about 3 months what this trend line looks like. It could actually dip even further because less people are playing, or you may see more people involved in combat. Even though the ships aren't as consequential, you may see more people involved in participating in ships being destroyed in general. We shall see.
Yeah, I think we have less people. That's basically it.
Yeah. So your experience is you're out there, you're flying around, and Pando, you're seeing less people out there fighting or not? What's it like?
Well, yes, I would say so. I mean, basically, I'm looking at the map every day because I'm hunting stuff and rock and so on. And yeah, I definitely can see, I think everyone can see it by now, right? Mm-hmm. That it's umbrella or nothing. It's basically, it's black and white.
Yeah.
So
do you think that'll change?
Good for anything between.
With the Sino change, do you think that'll change?
With that, I don't think so, no. I think that's probably going to make it worse, right? Because now you have to be more prepared, and it's easier for bigger groups to have this kind of stuff ready, and I would guess it's going to make it even more black and white.
Is there any way to suppress the money making as opposed to for the bigger groups, as opposed to the smaller groups that need need a way to get in and start, I don't know, incentivizing their players to do what they're doing. Taking up little parts of nullsec so they can harvest the area.
Well, so I made that Reddit post a while ago. That also includes that the security level of systems should be organic. Means if you're ratting in a system way more, then it should be a higher security level, which means less high value rats and all that stuff, right? So over time, you would have to manage your space way more, right? And bigger groups would have more to manage, which gives basically an advantage to smaller group because it's easier to manage. Then you would also have to spread out. You can't just be all in one place at all times. And you would have to look at options too, where do you find enough space for all your dudes and stuff like this. I think the same should be happening with mining, but even that, I think the blackout thing is, it's just not promoting anyone. Like it's not helping. It's not giving any incentive for anyone to undock without like that big umbrella. So that's what needs to change, really. I mean,
do you think those incentives are coming?
I understood it from the beginning as a temporary thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just hoping they're not too patient with it, and they've, like CCP has shown, they are very patient, like be it good or bad. But so let's hope it's not, in 6 months or something. I think that would be very unhealthy for the game. If it's another week or 2 or 3, I think if players are loyal enough to deal with it. But let's not make it too long, right? I think everyone learned a lesson.
Rolling back blackout?
Not rolling it back entirely, but changing local, but not going completely no local, because it's not promoting any day-to-day activity for people that want to just go out, red and mine and stuff like this. There would be potential targets for people who want to go hunt stuff all day. But like if you do small or medium scale fleets right now, you're not going to get lucky. You're not going to find anything, or you find a blob. It's both not the greatest thing ever. Like wormholes have a little bit more of a chance. They can roll, and after like 20 tries, they might just get a rocker that's that makes a mistake and then doesn't let a sign or whatever, right? So you can get stuff there. But the only reason why they can do that is also because they can get away, right? The wormhole isn't that far. They can go back to their wormhole and they're fine. Normal fleets, you would have to travel so far to get stuff. Then you don't want to get trapped there. And that's usually what should happen, right?
You don't think the rage
nobody
roll nerf is coming soon?
I don't think that's coming soon. No, I don't think so.
It might actually further reduce activity, maybe. I don't know what.
I don't think. I mean, is the rage roll thing really a problem? I mean, wormholes are not the problem for people in space care bearing, right? They usually they're mass limited. Like they're usually not bringing like 200 people, right? So if they bring like, let's say 50 dudes in a very tight setup, which is what most wormholes do, very numbers efficient, pimped out stuff, that also gives me, for example, the opportunity to bait these guys, right? To be out, and then it's worth it sitting around doing a standing fleet. If there's enough people roaming, I'm more than willing to have a standing fleet up and drop some subcaps, right?
It's just another one of those easy and low developer time changes that CCP could bring in, and they have talked about it, and they're not very happy with how rolling holes is working. So that would pretty much be my next guess on what they're going to bring the nerf back to.
So all changes I'm always a fan of those who create opportunities for content creation. And I don't think changing rolling wormholes would be good for that. If you change that, it's way harder to create content, and the game misses out. I think rolling wormholes is totally fine.
Couldn't you say the same about the blackout?
Say what?
Couldn't you argue the same thing about the blackout, that it actually didn't bring content? It made it a lot more difficult to actually have any form of content or activity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, right?
All right, let's look
Because
at.
there's less target in space, you have less opportunity for content.
I'm going to take you
That's all
back.
I'm saying.
I'm going to take you back now, Panda, to 2000. Wow, was it 2018 or 2019 January, where you invaded Hard Knocks' home, Rage, and destroyed their 2 keep stars? What?
That was December 18.
December. Okay. Yeah, we can see that on the graph here. I'll see if I can zoom in on it. No, I guess I can't. But you can see it in the bottom right over here. End of Rage is marked on this graph. What's funny is that it's not the highest peak, even though, I mean, you would think that would be when the most amount was destroyed in wormholes. Those are 2 keep stars. Those are huge money. But actually, there was a couple peaks after that. We'd have to ask Exuki or someone from Wormhole space to interpret what those peaks are. And even before that, there was a few peaks that were higher than that. As far as this actually might be ship destruction. Yes, this is ship
Yeah,
destruction.
I was about to say that's probably just chips, right? And just because they only formed like a real defense fleet once, and then they self-destruct. I'm not sure if the self-destructing capitals are in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, but
they should be. But
we're looking at no, if they're self-destructing, I don't know if they count. Maybe. But you're looking at the black line here, and you can see that here is the end of Rage right here. And yeah, there was a big peak before that, and there was a peak about the same size after that. I just don't know what that is, because what you did was take out the largest wormhole alliance or corporation, and you destroyed 2 keep stars that belonged to them, which was the most that we'd known about at the time. I'm going to take you back to Hard Knocks because something came up on the Eve forums today. Hard Knocks, the Alliance, warning, scam. And it looks like somebody was recruited to Hard Knocks. They asked him to pay $5 billion because he was doing a rental agreement. I remember Hard Knocks actually.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's just that nobody told. Yeah, whatever. So one thing you have to know for people who don't understand is that you need to be careful when you're paying for entrances to things. And if you join a corporation and they say, we'll move all your stuff, just show up at this system in low sec or something, it's likely that you're going to be ambushed. I know that Goonswarm has done that in the past, but so have many other groups. Although they now, I think, changed their policy not to do that. I don't know. It's ambiguous to me because somebody got killed like last year. But here, somebody paid to rent a system. They paid $5 billion, and then that wasn't honored, and they were destroyed. Oh, I see. So he says that the message that came from from Hard Knocks was that I have talked to my directors. I'm quoting here. They have looked at your history, and we are happy to accept. And then it looks like ultimately that wasn't accepted. So $5 billion he paid, and he actually. The outcome of the alliance is not rented. Give it back to scam. They basically kept the money and didn't let him take over one of the wormholes to make money back. So he got scammed.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, he got scammed. Check that out. That's in Corp and Alliances. And you know what tells me something? This is in Eve forums. And he's reaching out to prove that he was scammed. And I'm thinking he's not that experienced because he's posting in the forums. This kind of thing usually plays differently on Reddit, which is where the uncensored forums basically are. But I like this. It shows that people are still inside the game, so that's pretty cool. And then, of course,
we need more of this.
We need more of this. And of course, you have all the comments having no sympathy for the guy, saying, well, it looks like it's your fault. So, yes, Hard Knocks scammed someone. If you're renting a wormhole, you are doing all that stuff at your own risk.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Eve is known for, though. I mean, that dude can hardly be surprised, right?
Right. Well, this is the brutal part of the game. And then we'll go over to this other forum post that I thought was pretty interesting. And this is what to expect when you're a new player. And he sets out 5 or 6 points. That's the actual title of the thread if you want to look it up. What is it like for a new player? And it is in general discussions. And it's a post from Flint Nova. And I don't know if he's actually new, but he posts that he kind of disparages the game. He says the game is not 100% about skill. It's about keybinds. and essentially you always lose if you're not using keybinds. And so it doesn't matter how much a player plays this game. If you buy 2 omegas, buy 4 plexes, and you learn all, basically you get skills without playing the game. The story is non-existent is another criticism he has.
Who is that?
This is his name is Flint Nova. Actually,
why do we care? Sorry.
Well, it's a new player perspective, so I want to get to the funny part is, so he says it's impossible to play as a new player, and he explains why. If you're basically farming, if whatever, and then all careers in the game are boring and feel not important. Okay, so anyway, it's a criticism, and the very first comment after all that is like, it's not really that bad, man.
Yeah, well, he's right. Yeah. I mean, that dude is like a bit of it in the making, I guess, right? Yeah. So he's a bit of noob.
Yeah, those are rare. If he's not excited yet, it's going to get worse. Okay, I derailed way back at the beginning when, Pando, you were talking about goals. And that's what my friend and I were talking about before we looked at the graphs. We're looking at the decline of destruction in nullsec. Actually, lowsec had an even longer decline, so I didn't point that out, but it did. And we were talking about how we got here. What was the big problem? And we think that skill injectors that were made to give people a chance to catch up to players who had been here many years were the catalyst of... they were the gunpowder of this bomb, and other components were the fact that the Rorqual could be so efficient, and another component was that super capitals could jump right to the Rorqual. And so all these things combined allowed... Oh, and the other thing was that people could create multiple accounts.
Citadels.
Yeah, and citadels too, and how hard they were to destroy. Well, you put all these things together, even though they were developed at different times and had different purposes, but you put it all together and you start getting what we ended up having, which was a very safe environment by which to grow your money-making potential, therefore distorting the markets for everybody else. So if you were a miner in HiSec that just started playing and the only thing you knew how to do was mine, your mining was worthless because it was completely... that market was completely destroyed by all the over mining that was happening in nullsec. And if you were in lowsec, there's no reason for anybody to play in lowsec because the money and the safety was actually in nullsec. So why would you waste your time in the dangerous lowsec? You just join Horde, or you would join Imperium, or you would join Test, and these groups would basically say, yeah, come on in, we'll train you for our needs, which is to get you in a fleet because we require you to fight, and the trade-off is that you get to harvest at a higher rate than lowsec and highsec in relative safety. So that's what was going on there. But we were basically saying, like, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And the conclusion I came to, which I'll probably talk about later on in one of the shows, is without a slow burn of goals, without those aspirational goals that you're working towards that take a while to get to, the game goes almost from really exciting beginner to bitter vet, I'm out of here, there's nothing else to achieve. And I think a lot of the anger that we're seeing from people towards CCP is that when they were on that path, they were given the path, right? Like, this is what you need to do. You need to get yourself into this and then get yourself into that. And this puts you here. You're in a Rorqual and you're mining, you're making a ton of money for your second Rorqual or your next Titan or your next Nyx, whatever. And you're doing that while you're sitting with a group of guys in your citadel with your super capital ship in order to defend anybody who gets into trouble. And you have one person able to do both those things at the exact same time. And that is very social and very cool, and you feel like you're progressing, and that, I think, makes for a lot of happy players. So when that gets taken away, not only do the people... you upset people not only that have these things, but people who wanted to have those things. And that was one of the things that we were discussing.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious for players who've been here a while to see, we've seen the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs, but to me, it's become very obvious that there is, of course, a lot of backlash to the changes because you took away people's goals. And without those goals, it's very possible, they're like a loose tooth. It's very possible they will fall out of this game because they have less to hold on for.
It's because CCP has kept doing what I call the quality of life creep, right? They've removed the value of these intermediary points. So what I call the internships and the middlemen and the service providers. So you don't actually advance in activity. You kind of have to sit there as a new player and wait till you get to a certain point, or you have to then swipe your credit card, right? You don't put a new player in a role of like salvaging, of trucking minerals, of all of these what you would call menial work, but it's still meaningful. Menial work is meaningful. If you remove it, you're flattening the game, and there's no roles for new players to do when they are learning.
Yeah. Oh, some comments here, and this might be from some of your guys, Pando, I'm not sure. But it says, let's see. Wormholes, since creation, were printing ISK, basically. And although I wouldn't disagree with that, it was a risk versus reward ratio. So it was much more risky to live in wormholes.
So
However, it may not have
ISK
worked that way, but
ISK making is actually way less risky in wormhole space than anywhere else, right? So,
Yeah.
of course, wormholers, they're always going to be like, oh, we're so scary. Come on, don't give me that bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
they
You
only
can just
give you
roll.
half the story, right? The blue loot is a massive ISK faucet at the moment, and it's completely not counted in the MER.
I agree. And
That's also what Hilmer was on about, I think, when he dropped that comment about wormholes shouldn't be rolling their wormholes easily. It's about the ISK making potential there, because you can just roll all the wormholes, and then who's going to stop you in your caveat red? If you've got eyes on the new wormhole, or like a doorstop even, which means you have basically a ship outside, ready to jump in as soon as something lands on the wormhole. You just jump, and the wormhole is collapsed. Nobody can come in, and there's a new wormhole. Nobody knows where it is, and so on, right?
Yeah.
So it's so safe. It's the safest way to make ISK, really, right?
It's the main problem in all of EU, right? That everything is safe. Shipping and logistics is safe. Living in and crabbing in null is safe. Living in wormholes and printing ISK is safe. Everything is safe.
I got
How
your
did
point.
this happen?
I got your point, but let's go back for a second to wormholes, and that is that what I was saying was that the way it was tuned was risk versus reward. Same with nullsec. Here's the difference. It seemed to me that wormholers were very good at taming the wildness of wormholes and extracting the high benefit that was associated with the risk. They they figured out how to defeat the risk, and they benefited from the immense wealth that they could dig out of that place. But they were doing it, I think, in such small numbers, not because they're virtuous, but just there weren't that many of them. And you had to be super organized, and you have to dedicate a lot of actual time to it, I believe. And the problem, hold on, I'm not finished with my point. Let me finish this point. The problem in nullsec was the same thing. As long as I think the Imperium were the only ones that were growing and using the umbrella, it didn't seem like it was time to change the game. It wasn't until Test started doing it, then maybe we're getting closer to that, but it really seemed to fall, the changes seemed to fall when NCPL essentially was convinced by Horde to do what they had been fighting over internally to do, which was, are we going to remain PvPers or are we going to do this crabbing thing? And when they switched within a month, I think within a month, then everything started to change. And the first thing that Hilmar said was, when we see consolidation around the idea of how you win the game, that's when we know we have to act. So I think that's something that's been overlooked. It's when everybody started doing the same thing, CCP said, too safe, everybody's figured it out, there's no counterplay to it, we got to change it, and we got to change it now.
But that's because CCP's designs are flat. Once you've figured them out, once you've actually invested the time to figure out how this works, what ship you're going to use, how you're going to live in the wormhole space that's been created, all of these things, eventually we figure it out. Every time it's about PvE, when it's the environment, eventually we're going to figure out how to do it optimally, and all of the threat is going to disappear.
Right,
The only real threat in EVE is supposed to be other players, but CCP have given us self-sufficiency everywhere, so there is no risk. I don't need to fight my neighbor. Look at the the Triglavian stuff, right? It's teetering off. It's dropping like a rock. No one's losing anything anymore.
Well, you're right. Also, these are ships destroyed. So yeah, they have figured out how to do those, and people share that information with other people. It's always happened. You're correct about that. What I'm saying is that, and this has always been the case since the beginning of the game, there were ways that you could find out how to do missions efficiently and blast right through them. That hasn't changed. So what changed? Everybody started doing the same thing, and it was too safe. And at that point, you already have a distortion in money. I don't think CCP entered in and said, hey, goons are winning this game, we got to stop them. Or the Imperium's making too much money, we got to put a stop to that to even up the teams. They let them get 1,000 Titans compared to the North that had 500. And only 6 months before that, it was 500 versus 500. CCP still did not step in. They only stepped in when everybody decided, okay, that's how you win the game. Let's go do that. And I think when
you say that, right, 500 Titans versus 1,000 Titans, right? You do the same as everyone in this game. You forget to say, what's the per capita number? How many Titans in the Imperium per capita compared? It does matter.
No, it doesn't.
That's the whole thing. That's the only thing that matters.
No, you put 500 Titans into an area, and you put 1,000 into that area. The 500 Titans isn't even going to fight. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 players or 500 players dual boxing. Makes no difference. The threat alone will not create any activity between those two.
But what matters is how many Titans per system owned, how many Titans per capita supported and defended. This is what matters.
It doesn't matter.
The Imperium is not as much of a problem as people tend to think, because they always leave out those numbers.
It doesn't matter, because if you go to war, you take all your farmers and you go to war, and that's why you had 1,000 Titans in the North. It doesn't matter if you deserve 1,000 Titans because you're 2,000 players. Makes no difference. You didn't have to defend the home because of the timer problems with these structures, and so you have no threat of being taken over, and so you can move everybody up north for the period of a month. That is a broken game.
You're completely obfuscating my point. My point is that when people look at the game and tell you that the problem is proliferation, the Imperium is not the massive problem. It's the game in general. The Imperium is actually underrepresented when it comes to these numbers, if you start looking at per space and per capita. Which is also why I believe it was last year the North was actually crabbing more ISK than the Imperium per capita.
Well, there was last month?
Last year.
Well, okay. I would have to look at charts to see that. I don't understand how that's possible. But let me just go back to the point that it's not that CCP is punishing the Imperium, is what I was saying. It's more like the consensus became, do this to win the game. And at that point, in order to preserve competition, you need to basically say that whole activity, that whole thing, that needs to stop, and stop right now. And we'll develop incentives for you to try to win right after we do that. But this also has to stop like right now. And they were nerfing them, right? They've been nerfing Rorquals for a year. And you could see, as all you people who analyzed the MER that came out last month, the monthly economic report, you could see that the number being mined was going down slowly and slowly and slowly as the excavators, the drones that mine, were nerfed, as the Rorquals were nerfed, as et cetera, et cetera. So it was coming down slowly, and people think, well, they should have just left it alone. It was coming down naturally on its own. The nerfs were working. To get to the point they needed to get to, it would have taken another year. And at that point, you just made 500 Titans in 6 months, or at least 500 more showed up. We assume they were made within the time of X-47 and recently the Tribute campaign. That's 500 Titans. So you're saying another 1,000 Titans will get the numbers where we want them. That is way too late. It was already too late for them to act, to do to do the whole suppression of the mining machinery in nullsec. It was already too late, but better now than never. All right. That's all we have time for. It's come around the clock. Thanks very much for sticking with us. We will see you tomorrow morning for more Today in EVE Online.